Women around the world have lent their voices to many protests aimed to effect change through pressure, from the right to vote, education and healthcare, to demanding civil rights and justice. Women have been front and center. Marches for civil rights in the US, against apartheid in South Africa, the Arab Spring in North Africa that toppled governments, and so many others. And at the forefront, at many of these protests, women. From civil rights activist Rosa Parks, Nobel Peace Prize laureates Wangari Maathai of Kenya, former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and Leymah Gbowee, also of Liberia, and Bring Back Our Girls co-founder Aisha Yesufu are just a few of the many women who affected change through protests. And lately, the Black Lives Matter, co-founded by 3 women whose movement turned global, contributing to justice for George Floyd, the African-American man from Minnesota whose death at the hands of a police officer was caught on video. This week on Our Voices, we shine a light on some of these women who brought justice through activism. Hello and welcome to Our Voices on the Voice of America. I'm Dimyake Mwakaliele. Now, the family and supporters of George Floyd got a small taste of justice for the man whose murder at the hands of a police officer united the world in protest over racial injustice, ignited by such movements as Black Lives Matter. Derek Chauvin, a former Minneapolis police officer, was convicted on 2 charges of murder and 1 charge of manslaughter in April and will serve 22.5 years in prison. While many thought the sentence should have been tougher, there was applause for the mass protests that put pressure on the justice system. Here are some reactions from people who visited the Black Lives Matter Plaza in D.C. after the verdict.
I am from New York City, the Bronx, and we've seen time and time again, growing up in the city where things like this happened and there was no justice that was served. And I think because people came out and voiced their opinions and their passion for what happened, and not only did it reach here, it reached around the world. And because of that, I believe that we got the verdict that we got. We normally wouldn't even get that. So it's a miracle.
There's a lot that we as Black people have been through. And so I think just seeing this outcome, that there's still a lot more to go, but there is hope, and it's really great to see cultures and communities coming together for justice. I'm just coming from the MLK Memorial, and just there is no justice and there's no peace. And so therefore it's really important that we continue to push the justice, that we continue to come together as a people, just to continue to support each other and to keep moving forward.
We know even with Dr. Martin Luther King, then there was a Coretta Scott King, and we know that she was a soloist and that she sang many concerts to raise money even back then for his efforts to go forward. And so women have always played a vital role, and we continue to, just because we're nurturers and we're out there and we know that there can be a difference and that a change can be made through our sons and daughters. And we see many leaders, female leaders today, who are doing just that. And we're going to keep going because we do see hope on the horizon.
Moving now to Nigeria, where women activists were on the front line in last year's mass protests against police brutality and also led ongoing movements to rescue young girls kidnapped by Boko Haram. From Abuja, Nigeria, reporter Timothy Abiezu looks at the role that Nigerian women activists have played.
This government, they don't get sense.
Nigerian activist Aisha Yesufu addresses a pressing national issue with her online listeners: equity and improved conditions in Nigeria. Yesufu has been an activist since she was in school nearly 3 decades ago, but it's not been easy.
I'm not that typical person that you see coming out to make demands. Here I am, I'm a Muslim, I'm a woman, I wear hijab, and then it's like, oh, you're not supposed to speak as a Muslim. That's why a lot of people look at it.
Women like Yesufu are pressing on with their cause, despite biases and even threats. In 2014, she became prominent for co-founding the Bring Back Our Girls BBOG movement, a group that raised global awareness demanding the release of 276 girls kidnapped by Boko Haram in northern Nigeria. Last October, she also took part in the End SARS protests against police brutality. A photo of her kneeling and pointing her clenched fist into the air against heavily armed police officials became the movement's symbol. Yesufu's resilience has inspired many other women in Nigeria. The End SARS protests led to an increasing number of women organizing and leading street demonstrations. Among them, 22-year-old Rinu Oduala, a leader of the protests in Lagos.
I'm constantly reminded that as a female growing up in Nigeria, I only need to be seen and not heard. So I fight each day to use my voice and platform to talk about issues affecting my society.
Nigerian culture, as elsewhere in Africa, is highly patriarchal, but things are changing gradually. Last month, Nigeria's Women's Affairs Minister moved for a constitutional review that would give women up to 35% representation in public offices. The current figure is just 7%. Education is the reason more women are finding their voices, says Vivian Belong, founder of Social Action Nigeria. Belong says it will take a major change before women are perceived as equals in Nigeria, something she says will not happen soon. But activists like Yesufu and Oduala vow to continue to push past restrictive societal norms. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Protests often bring out large crowds and raise awareness, but how much impact do they have in changing policy or attitude? And at what personal risk do women who challenge a system take? Aisha Yesufu says she's ready to die for a cause than be silenced by fear.
In terms of bringing back our girls, I think the impact that we made more than anything is the consistency. For 7 years we stayed on. Bring Back Our Girls campaign is the longest running campaign in Nigeria. It's like 22 years now of our democracy. The greatest inspiration that we've been able to do, getting people to understand the power of their voices, their ability to make demands, and indeed that making demands actually do yield results. Even if the people in authority, as much as possible, they will try to shut you down, they will try to attack you, they will try to make it look as if, oh, you're wasting your time. No, you aren't. And so seeing how things have gone on with more people making those demands is absolutely amazing. The Bring Back Our Girls movement is a women's-led movement, and the impact of women in activism, it's really amazing. And I think it's sending so much signal to the women of this generation that indeed the power is in their hands.
You mentioned, the dangers of activism, that you literally can put your own life at risk sometimes. What protection do you count on to, be able to guarantee that you're not going to be killed or unnecessarily hurt in the process?
There are so many dangers that come from actually being a voice, especially in a place like Nigeria, where human rights are not respected, that we come after citizens and kill citizens. They've been killing protesters for years. There's more or less no protection. You're just there knowing fully well that at any time, anything can happen. For me, death is not when I can no longer breathe in oxygen and bring out carbon dioxide. Death for me is when I can no longer speak on against tyranny and injustice because I'm afraid to die. So I've sort of like made peace with myself. Whatever happens, like I've said before, the worst thing the Nigerian government can do to me is either to arrest me or assassinate me, and I'm ready for either one of them. The one of the NSAS protests, when police were shooting at me, throwing the tear gas canister at me, and also shooting live bullets, I literally thought I was going to die. And the only thing I did say was to say to God, please, I just want the bullet that is going to hit me to just go through my heart so that it will be an instantaneous death. By 2017, where all my accounts, I had to make my husband signatory to my accounts. Everything, like right now, even 2 weeks ago, we sat down again, my passwords, my things, just putting things in place, because at any time you can be killed. The victim card is going round. And it's either being a victim in Nigeria is no longer a matter of if, it is a matter of when.
Where does activism and governance meet? Because obviously there's a point in time when there's got to be, a systematic change. And is that your end game as well?
it's so sad when we have governments who, when they see protesters, they look at protesters as the enemies. They think that they're out there to antagonize them or one thing or the other. And meanwhile, the people who are actually enemies of the state, those who carry arms against the state, are the ones that the government are always going after, talking to them in terms of fighting them and being there with them, listening to them, and sort of like engaging them. That's wrong. Meanwhile, the people who are harmless, who do not carry arms, who come out to protest legitimately, are the ones that are now being killed, everything is being done against them. There's nowhere we can work without working together. It's about being at the table. It's about talking together. It's about getting the issues solved. Nobody wants to be on the streets protesting. Nobody wants to be out there being pelted by bullets, or being pelted by tear gas canisters, or the rain spitting you. If things were working, people wouldn't be on the street.
We're going to take a short break now. When we come back, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Leymah Gbowee of Liberia speaks on the continued need for protests to bring change in Africa and around the world. Don't go away.
We're bringing women's voices to the conversation, and more than that, we're building a community of inclusion and empowerment.
Here in Kinshasa, campaigns to raise awareness against the spread of coronavirus are common, but getting that information to people who have no access to water, electricity, or money can be a challenge.
We are here at Kalerwe Market in Uganda, Kampala, where in this whole market, women are crying out for their situations to change.
For women, it will be better for us.
I think a big thing for me is just being able to say that when these protests are happening, does it turn around into policy?
Our kids are raped every single day.
This movement got the government to listen. It really was powerful because it showed what is possible when men and women band together and say, enough is enough.
It's not necessary anymore to climb on a car. I can be in any place to cheer with the people.
Welcome back. You're watching Our Voices. Leymah Gbowee was one of 3 recipients of the coveted Nobel Peace Prize in 2011, alongside former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and Tawakkol Abdel Salam Khalid Kaman of Yemen. Gbowee is credited with helping force a peace agreement in Liberia that ended the rule of former President Charles Taylor and paved the way for Africa's first democratically elected female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Gbowee, the subject of a 2008 documentary called Pray the Devil Back to Hell, led a group of women dressed in white to demand an end to the war, using all available tactics to effect pressure, including a sex strike and threats to undress in public, to ensure a peace agreement was signed. She reflects on the election of President Sirleaf and the continued importance of protests as a vehicle for change.
When I look at Liberia from the perspective of women activism, I tell you that we're at a very good place. And we just need to continue the mentorship for these women. When it comes to the politics and political participation for women, I think we still have a lot of work to do. I think one of the key things we need to do is to move away from this space and this thinking of, oh, President Sirleaf didn't accomplish X, Y, Z. So whatever her failures, and I'm putting that in quotes, where we pass it on to any woman who aspires to be. And most times you find that really being put out there by women, oh, we have one woman president and she didn't do this. However, from 1847 until today, we've had only one woman president or male president. There will always be failures with governments, but citizens must never give up on taking one pebble and throwing it into the lake to create that ripple effect. And when I come home, when I'm here, that's the mindset with which I operate. And whatever I'm doing, even in this fight for helping hospitals get oxygen tank and generators and fuel, I know it's nothing, it's just a scratch on the surface. But my attitude is, if I can help one family achieve their goals, achieve their dreams, I have done service to Liberia.
What are your thoughts around the fact that protests still need to take place? The fact that so many governments seem to have to be pressured into reacting. Did you hope, or at least by this point, that that was not going to necessarily be the vehicle through which change happens?
No, I've never, ever. I'm an optimist when it comes to Africa. I believe that we're going to be the next big thing. But when it comes to our leaders, sometimes I'm pessimistic. My optimism is that a day will come, a time will come in Africa where we will not need to protest but that time is resting on our shoulders and our ability to mentor the next generation of leaders of integrity. And so you have millions of people whose future is resting on a few individuals who are only there for their self-gain and for their self-enrichment. So we need to move away from this mindset of, oh, I'm not a politician, I'm just a journalist. Oh, I'm not a politician, I'm just a peace activist. We are all politicians. And until we get to that place where we say, we will help to shape the political landscape of our continent, we'll continue to bemoan the fact that we have to protest for things to change.
And the role that women specifically play. Obviously, you're a woman, you participated and have been participating alongside women. Do you see that as a big driving force in change?
I think the role of women is a huge driving force in change. I also feel like as we drive change, we need to not worry too much about the the popular opinion. What we need now is to really gird our waist and put our hearts in freezers as women, because the time has come for us to move away from just advocating for change. There needs to be a balance. That's what I'm trying to say in civil society and in government. And it will never happen if we continue to see government as enemy.
What role do you see protests playing in the future in terms of electing and keeping more women in positions of power, so that some of these protests, some of them which really push for the rights for women, don't have to necessarily come through protest? Or is that an issue at all?
Let me just say one thing to you. And people always ask me, what is your regret when you protested for peace in Liberia? My biggest regret is that when we protested, we didn't have a group of women locked up in a room drawing out a political strategy for women's involvement in politics. That is my biggest regret. And it will continue to happen, because every time I see protests like Egypt, like Sudan, like all of the places that they've had protests, women are always in the front chanting, and they become the poster child or the poster figure for everything for success. And then when it comes to determining the leadership after the protest, you don't see them anymore. Until we add our protests to strategies around political inclusion, we will continue to protest. We'll continue to be used as the face of protest and never seen in government and never seen in leadership position. We've moved away from just being in protest to being in a room where decisions are being made.
We are in 2021. The last Nobel Peace Prize that was given to a woman from Africa was you and former President Johnson Sirleaf, and prior to that, environmentalist Dr. Wangari Maathai of Kenya. What does this representation of peace efforts by women, recognized through the Nobel Peace Prize, mean for the future?
If you move from Cameroon to Uganda to Kenya to wherever there's a crisis on our continent, at the grassroots level, which is the level that is most important, the women are the ones keeping these societies together. The women are the first humanitarians. They are the first responders. They are the first ones asking for peace processes. But we've seen over time people covering the work that these women doing by trying to make it just grassroots effort, just grassroots work, just oh, it's just the women. And I think the just narrative is to take away the gravity or the strength that these women bring to the work that they do and to take away the importance of what they're doing. Because I can tell you for free that probably our story would not have been out there had there not been a documentary called Pray the Devil Back to Health. Because Pray the Devil Back to Health came out years after we finished doing the work. People in the media need to help because until we can transform that just narrative, people will continue to really play down or downplay the work that women are doing in these different communities. I hope to see more women laureates, whether African or Asian, but of course I would love to see more African women laureates. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I know the Nobel is one of the biggest, if not the biggest peace prize in the world. But there are other prizes now that people are putting out there. And I'm hopeful that sooner rather than later, those prizes will recognize some of the incredible work that is being done on the continent by women.
Leymah Gbowee is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate from Liberia and also author of several books, including Mighty Be Our Powers, How Sisterhood, Prayer, and Sex Changed a Nation at War. She spoke with us via Skype from Monrovia, Liberia. We're going to take another short break now, but when we come back, activism takes on many forms, including music. We'll hear from a young musician who has decided to use her voice to preach peace.
Can't take no more. You'll see these tear stains on my face. Keep sticking to our guns. We're gonna fight, not run. But don't stand for hate, stand for love. So what we gonna do now? Yeah. So what we gonna do now? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got my face on the ground.
We're back. You're watching Our Voices on the Voice of America. I'm your host, Ndimyake Mwakalielye. On today's show, we are highlighting the role women have played in protests that have effected change. One of the biggest protests that drew global participation was against the killing of George Floyd of Minnesota by a policeman, all caught on camera. Around the world, people marched and held up banners to demand justice. Some were inspired to write songs appealing for peace. Among these, 20-year-old activist, musician, and college student Taylor Hall from Indiana.
I've been doing music since I was about 12 years old, writing songs about different things that have happened in my life. And this past year, after releasing my debut single, I Can't Breathe, after all of the protests last year, I realized that there's so many messages that you can convey using music, whether it's for social justice or common life problems or relationship problems or mental health and personal things.
And you've participated in marches. You were in Washington, you were in Minnesota, using your voice as a musician. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
When I first released my debut song, I Can't Breathe, I performed it in Indianapolis at our state capitol. And this was at one of the largest protests for racial justice in 30 years in Indianapolis. So that was my first time performing it in front of over 10,000 people. And after that, people were telling me that message needs to be heard everywhere, not just in my community. So I ended up going to Washington for the March on Washington about a month or two later in August. And then from there, just traveling to different communities and organizations across the country to convey this message and to challenge people to become involved in advocacy in a different form. And it's not always just protesting. Sometimes it's through your music or your art or your fashion or your poetry or things that you do naturally.
And as a woman, as a young woman at that, and also a very young woman, a youth, do you feel that your voice is heard?
From being persistent organizing, protesting, doing different forms of advocacy work for the past year, and just even within a month doing things consistently, being persistent, I'd say my voice has been heard and it's been respected and taken seriously just from that. My grandfather marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and met him, and he went to all my elementary and middle and high school programs and spoke about that experience. So just having that history in my family, my mom's name is Coretta after Coretta Scott King. I would say kind of just made sense for me to be vocal and be that voice.
What would your message be to young people like yourself? How they can participate, how they can use their voice?
I would say for young people, my main message is that we all have a platform, whether that's our 5 friends or our 50 family members or our 500 to 5,000 followers on social media. Your voice can be through speaking like how I do, or through your music like how I do, or it can be through different forms of arts, which is what I've really tried to express this past year through this term artivism, inspiring activism through art. Like you can make paintings, like murals across the country have spoke volumes, and that's no one's speaking, that's artists doing what they love to do to convey a message.
We'd like to hear from you. Connect with us on social media. Our handle is @VOA Our Voices. Tell us what you think about women's voices and how they're being heard in their demand for equality and human rights. You can also drop us a message on WhatsApp. That number is right here on your screen. And that is our show for this week. On behalf of my Our Voices colleagues and the Voice of America, thank you so much for watching. I'm Dimyake Mwakalielye, and we leave you here now with another song by Taylor Hall, Unfolding.
Everything is starting to work out. Finally pulled myself out of that drought. Now I'm on screens, living my dreams, and it's everything that I could have imagined. Yeah, I wasn't too sure in the beginning, but I'm right where I'm supposed to be. It's all unfolding. It took some time, but I guess you could say I'm growing.